as China wakes up, we're going to have the panel from China join us. Most of the panels here are in China, and talk about the role of China in the global EV market. Because obviously China has quite a few characteristics that make it a key, if not dominant player in that marketplace globally. First of all, as we know, China is the largest auto market in the world. Second of all, it's the biggest battery maker in the world, as I just alluded to. Third, it's the biggest EV manufacturer, and will be the biggest, it continues to be the biggest consumer of EVs, except for last year when Europe briefly took the lead. And also the Chinese government is supporting this sector heavily. And then finally, of course, China recovered from COVID faster than anybody else. So it's sort of speeding ahead while others may be still trying to recover. So all of those things mean that China has this a unique position in this marketplace. Maybe I can ask you, Frank, to give a brief self-introduction, and then I'll go on to others first.
Okay. Hi, everybody. This is Frank speaking. I am working in Huai Automotive Company, Huai Automotive Systems Company Limited, which is the largest automotive component holding company in China. And we are majority held by SAIC Group, which is at the moment the largest OEM group. We have our local brand, SGM, cooperating with GM, also SAIC VW and SGM Wuling. In addition to that, we also have buses, trucks, etc., etc. So full product line. And I'm responsible for strategic planning in Haskell Group, and I'm constantly looking for startup companies, promising technologies to invest in, and also help them penetrate into the China market. That's it.
Great. Professor X, I see you on the screen. Can you give a brief self-introduction?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, this is Jianxiong from AutoX. I'm the CEO and founder of AutoX. AutoX is the leading self-driving car company in China, focused on level 4, level 5 fully self-driving. We have headquarters in Shenzhen. We have many other offices, including R&D office in Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Silicon Valley, as well as building factories and operation center in Changzhou and Wuhan. We are the first company in China, from China, also the second company in the world to attain the California driverless permit. We are also the first and right now the only company operating a fully driverless global taxi in China. We have a fleet of vehicle with our Generation 5 system for fully autonomy, and then operating in the city of Shenzhen. We have launched the service publicly to the general public in January this year, become the world's second and right now one of the only two completely driverless fleet operating on the ground every day. Yeah, that's a general intro of our company. I'm very happy to be here to share our thoughts about AV and EV.
Thank you, Professor X. I should note that I was sitting in one of Professor X's autonomous driving vehicles in Shenzhen only a few months ago, actually twice, and I was very impressed with how uneventful the ride was. And I eventually, at the end of the hour-and-a-half ride, I kind of got bored with watching the driver, so I started having conversations with other people in the car and forgot that we had no driver driving the car. But anyway, next I see Bill Russo join us. I'm sorry for the technical issues, Bill. Nice to see you. Would you like to do a self-introduction?
Sure, Howard, and thanks again. Hello, everyone. For those who I didn't speak to earlier, Bill Russo, founder and CEO of Automobility Limited. We're a strategy and investment advisory firm based in Shanghai. I have been in China 17 years now. Came over in 2004, heading up the then part of Daimler Chrysler Group Northeast Asia, where I was responsible for the operations of the joint ventures and Russo group in China. Stayed on in China in 2008, anticipating that this market was going to be quite transformative, both in size, scale, and in disruption for the automotive industry, and I wanted to be a part of that. And I've done that through a variety of roles, most recently as an auto analyst consultant, working for different firms, freelancing a bit. I spent some time in Tier 1 audio and infotainment, working with Harman as their head of corporate development, now with automobility. So yeah, happy to be here, Howard, and be part of the panel.
Terrific. And last but not least, Sammy Yi with On Semiconductor, the only person in our panel that's actually not sitting in China right now. Sammy, you're, I guess, in where? San Francisco or where?
Bay Area, yes.
Bay Area, right.
Yeah. Thank you, Howard. Hi, everyone. My name is Sammy Yi. I'm the Vice President of Strategic Business Development for On Semiconductor. So On Semi started the spin-off of Motorola Semiconductor. So we are the #1 leading supplier for CMOS image sensor for automotive application. That's including the rear view, surround view, in-cabin, ADAS, and autonomous driving. We actually been involved in China for many years ago, since Motorola time, around 30 years ago. We are among the first foreign company who set up the semiconductor factory in China. We now serve a wide range of market segment in China, including automotive, telecommunication, factory automation, and cloud computing, and then solar energies. So China is a very important market for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Sammy. So let me kick this off by asking Bill to give us kind of an overview of the place of China in the overall global EV marketplace and the ecosystem around it. You know, we've discussed, Bill and I, in the past, how it appears to us very often that even though China knows the US very well, people on this side of the pond seem to know China less well. And China is an increasingly important player in many markets, but especially in the auto market. So Bill, maybe you can give us an overall, paint an overall picture for us.
Sure, Howard, happy to do that. You know, first of all, you know, when you were here for as long as I have been, you kind of recalibrated your thoughts around how the market and how the industry works in the market. And I had, as most foreigners do when they come here, sort of preconceptions that I had to shed over time, right? The preconceptions we usually have are that, you know, China is sort of stuck in the past and copies everything, right? We don't see it as an innovative place. And what I've learned over time is we don't credit, as Westerners, we don't often see how innovation's done here and what's different about it. Let me point out the difference that I have observed over the course of the 17 years I've been here. The approach to innovation in the US is driven by tech. It's driven by technology and the ability to incorporate technology in products and sell those products to consumers who over the course of time have been conditioned to accept the solution in a way and use it in a way that that they have sort of heritage associated with. So in this industry, automotive, you know, the heritage of the car goes back more than 100 years. And when technology innovation happens, it happens usually through a combination of academic research backed by venture capital, right? So it's all based on what features and what technologies can be incorporated into a product that you can sell to a consumer market that has a relatively multi-generational habit of how it consumes the product. In China, what I've learned over time is that innovation is driven in a different way. It's driven by the ability to aggregate demand. Early in my time here was the ability to massively scale to a market that's much larger in size. It wasn't when I first got here, it was the 5th or 6th largest car market in the world. Now, since 2009, it's been the largest. But what it does is it effectively scales, it massively scales innovation to a much larger demand pool. And that consumer market in China doesn't have a multi-generational habit associated with what they consume, right? Parents and grandparents didn't consume the cars that today. First, or maybe the beginnings of a second generation of car ownership. And what you also have is you have a market where far more people consume mobility than own vehicles. Ridership, every human being has a mobility need, but far more people ride than drive. So the objective of a product isn't necessarily to create a driving experience, it's to create an experience of mobility. And what's appeared on the horizon and has become the aggregator of technology is the internet economy. What's happened over the course of the last decade is that the internet economy has stepped in and played a role of aggregating demand for mobility through the app economy. And when you think about that, you say, okay, what's innovative about that? Uber, Lyft, that was actually created in the US. Yes, but in a market like China, where 9 out of 10 people don't own a car, you can massively scale demand for mobility far more efficiently if you're presenting that through an app and you're putting people in a ride, or if you're consuming food or services through the apps that people are now consuming products and goods with. The internet economy is the new demand or innovation engine of the automotive industry in China. It is investing in companies like NIO, XPeng, Li Auto. These are the products of a heavy amount of internet-backed investment, and they have massive ability to deploy capital, and they're investing in the electric mobility tech and the autonomous mobility technology fields. And they're also very concerned about the connected user experience, because when a user is not driving a car, as Howard just said, from his own experience in Shenzhen, you stop paying attention to what's going on outside the car, and you're paying attention to what you're doing in the car, and that can be monetized. So the innovation engine in China is, a lot of it is backed by the digital economy. And the other element of it that I think is important for foreign viewers to understand is there's a whole lot of government support for the infrastructure required to commercialize these technologies, whether it's 5G for connectivity, or whether it's public charging infrastructure for electric vehicles, or the infrastructure associated with the vehicle-to-X communications associated with autonomous driving. So that's just some of my perspectives on what's different about China.
That's a great introduction, Bill. Let me turn next to Frank. Frank, I mean, your company has several decades of history that started out as a traditional automotive parts company serving traditional legacy automotive companies. But now you find yourself in the midst of this both digital and electrification revolution in China, which in many ways China is leading. So how has your company adapted to this new market circumstance, and how do you interrelate to the internet economy that Bill has just described?
I think Bill is fully correct that people are really looking for smart features in the EV. And according to figures from Baidu, about 89% of the consumers pay very much attention what kind of smart features does the EV have. And our corporation has 3 platforms catering to the new EV world. We have a let's say, chassis integration platform, where we have also integrated the ADAS systems and also intelligent lighting. So this is the first platform. The second platform is smart cabin, and also metal forming parts, doors and hoods and sunroofs, etc. And the third part is actually traction systems, heat management systems, etc. The traditional business only accounted for about 13% of the revenue, which is purely dependent on internal combustion engine. 50% of the business actually comes from the smart cabin group, which is called Yanfeng. And Yanfeng is a typical example of transforming itself from a tier 1 supplier to an ecosystem, let's say, management body. They have figured out what kind of hardware and software they need to develop and master themselves. For example, the domain controller the basic software layer, the drivers, intelligent seating, passive safety, smart surface. So all these are upgrading features for the next generation EVs, but they are cooperating with BATH, say Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, and Huawei in a certain way, or they are cooperating with new startup companies from all over the world. So this is the kind of ecosystem we want to create for the future, not only for the smart cabin business, but maybe also for other platforms and systems. That is why we constantly pay attention to promising new startups from all over the world. So I'm personally promoting a model which is called Corporate Venture Capital Alliance. So we would like to help the startup company all over the world to do proof of concept here in China using our tier 1 system capabilities, show the bright features from the startup companies to the OEMs. And once the OEMs are giving the green light, so tier 1s within our portfolio are in a position to give orders. And this actually gives great opportunity to our venture capital partners to co-invest with us. So all four parties are going to benefit from it: OEMs, tier 1s, venture capital funds, and startup companies. So I'm constantly discussing this kind of model with stakeholders around our ecosystems, and we are constantly discussing with startup companies. That's it.
Great. Thank you very much, Frank. So turning to Professor X. So you're at the head of one of the leading autonomous driving platforms in the world. You have operations primarily in China, but also elsewhere, including in the Silicon Valley. But you obviously can compare these markets very well, and you must have different strategies for these different markets. How do you, first of all, how do you compare the US market for your product with the Chinese market and system? And then second of all, is it really possible in today's both market environment as well as political environment for you to be attacking both markets at the same time?
Wait, thanks for a question. This is Jianxiong for AutoX. First of all, AutoX is a company focused on the China market. We have office in the US, but we are very, very dedicated to be laser focused on the China market. We are not focused on the US market. We don't plan to go to the US market anytime soon either. Yeah, that's one thing. But talking about the general picture about how do I compare the US market and China market? I think it definitely has its advantage for the China market. For one thing, as we all know, scale matters. In the China market is significantly larger, not in the sense that we are selling more cars, but in the sense that the population, just like Bill was mentioning, demand the mobility, the population that need mobility every day is significantly larger. A major percent of the population do not own a car. They rely on either public transportations or ride-hailing. This is where AutoX is addressed for the robot taxi industry. So I would say that there's a huge demand, a much significantly large market potential for robot taxi in China rather than any countries in the world, simply because the population, because the need for mobility. And secondly, just like Bill was mentioning also, there's not that many people in China that actually own a car or actually even have a driver license and know how to drive. The percentage of people, the car ownership culture is significantly weaker, but these people all need to move around. That means the demand for mobility is much higher. This creates a huge gap for the robot taxi, for having the computer to drive the car, to build an AI driver to drive the car. This is where we address on. And certainly, if we look at the bigger trend, the aging is becoming a significant problem in the following few decades for China. It's for economic, it's also for people's daily life. There's significantly less people were born in the 90s, in the 20s, 2000s. So therefore, we are going to expect a significant labor job for the young labor in the following few decades. If we don't address the automation issue, if we don't have automation, then we cannot address the aging issue. Therefore, if you look at the bigger trend, this creates a significant demand for drivers, because driver is one of the low-paid jobs that if we don't have enough young people, no one is going to drive. Just like if you go to Hong Kong, if you sit in a taxi, 90% of the time you will see someone senior with a very high age are driving those taxis, simply because Hong Kong was facing this aging problem ahead of mainland China. Therefore, we see that there's a much significantly huge potential for the Chinese cities to adapt self-driving car technology, simply because there's so many aspects of it. As we know that in US, the self-driving car industry has been have much longer history than in China. But the good thing for China is that because everything is rapidly developing, including the legal landscape rapidly opening. For example, AutoX was allowed to be the first company in China to actually launch a fully driverless robotaxi in the city of Shenzhen. This was something not imaginable like 5 years ago. You cannot even imagine that it would be allowed within the area of mainland China. But now it's reality. Now it's actually literally operating on the road every day. I was sitting there just a couple of days ago, sitting in one of our cars a couple of days ago. When you see the car is empty with you or sell only and everything drives by itself. This is really the future, and the future is turning into reality very quickly on the China side. And this is why we also choose China to be our preferred market, because we believe that this is definitely going to be the first market to have mass adoption of fully self-driving cars.
Thank you very much, Professor X. So Sammy, turning to you, you know, many of these trends that we've been talking about are obviously very, very favorable to a large semiconductor company that is focused on the China market, because obviously, you know, not only is there electrification going on, but there's digitalization going on. So presumably all that translates into many more chips required for each vehicle. On the other hand, you hear that in China, because of the conflicts between the US and China, that there's a fairly massive localization program going on. Of course, China is still pretty far behind in terms of their technology level for chips. But we don't know, interesting to get your view as to how many years behind they are. And then long-term, you know, what is the prospect for a large international chip manufacturer in China, given this push? So maybe you can comment on that.
Great, yeah. So I want to first start to echo what Bill, Frank, and then Professor X mentioned. China is really started to change, become more innovation. Right? So what I see, as Bill mentioned, China, the way China innovates is quite a difference. But in the whole automotive industry, I think Howard just mentioned the electrification and smart vehicle. This is not a minor change. To me, it's a huge disruption. Like I can see right now, there are two types of disruption happening. One is technology disruption, and then traditional gas car is basically a mechanical vehicle, mechanical device with many number of moving parts. But if you look at smart EV, according to Toyota, it only have 20 moving parts. The rest are electric and electronics. Basically become a bigger device for electronics, which includes electric motor, motor control, battery management, and all these smart function, smart features, connectivities. Right? So over the last 100 years, accumulated IP and know-how for moving parts like engine and then transmission now become irrelevant in the smart vehicle. It's a huge, huge disruption for the auto industry. And then if you look at business model disruption, it's actually happened. China is leading. I can just list a few. One is open source for autonomous driving, smart vehicle, led by Baidu Apollo platform, right? And then Geely just announced the open source for electrical vehicle architecture. And then if you look at contract manufacturing or EMS for smart EV by basically Geely and Foxconn, all those changes are very fundamental. And those will enable more innovative technology company getting into this market. And China is actually leading in this aspect. In terms of semiconductor company like ON Semiconductor, we are in China, we have seen the changes like from 30 years ago and to the rise of China automotive market, domestic player, and then to today, and especially under the China-US trade tension, we're seeing a huge change, right? We anticipate more and more semiconductor company startup from China and getting a government support, getting OEMs endorsement, and also a big market for them to play, right? So as a foreign company, and especially a large semiconductor company, we have to adopt in the new condition and environment. Basically, you cannot compete just based on the price or just offer me too product, because Chinese companies are very well known in terms of driving the cost. Like there's a very famous term in China, it's called 性价比, which means cost performance ratio or good enough performance at lower cost. Right? So for any company who want to compete in China market, you have to focus on your strength, which is providing differentiated product, service, and solutions. Right? So we believe China market will change, and then we are excited. Actually, even with more and more competition, this may drive us to develop even more, be more innovative, drive a more innovative product to serve the local customers.
So Sammy, one quick follow-up question. So everybody's heard a lot about this bottleneck in semiconductors affecting the car, the auto industry. Can you just say a couple of words about how that's happening in China?
Yeah, I think in China and worldwide is the same. I don't think there's a unique situation in China. Basically, this is all driven by the COVID-19, right? And then impact is not to automotive industry only, it's to every industry. But the significant impact to automotive industry have gotten the government attention. Right? I'll give you an example. For example, a shortage of 100,000 units of a chip will cause around $4 billion revenue impact for OEM, car OEM, as compared to the 60 million to the mobile phone OEM. Right? The financial impact for automotive industry is huge. So that's why it's getting a lot of attention. Right? And then it's all started with this COVID-19 drive lower demand, and the company started to deplete all the inventories. Now with the increased demand, it create a huge demand bubble. It will take semiconductor industry 6 to 9 months to respond and digest. Right? But most of the company now forecast in next, by second half of the year, this supply situation will significantly improve.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. So let me just turn to the subject of whether the China market is kind of separating from the West in some fashion, I mean, some degree, and whether or not foreign companies can still continue to make as much progress as they've had in China? Because as well known, some of the top automotive companies in the world made the largest share of their profits in China historically over the last few years, but then that seems to be changing. And then whether, on the other hand, the economies are so tied that, you know, this so-called decoupling is really not going to happen to the extent that some politicians or policymakers would like it to happen. You know, I see a lot of tensions and conflicts between these 2 points of view. Frank, do you want to address this question?
Yeah, well, the decoupling is mainly, I would say, happening in the most advanced process in the silicon world. I mean, the 5 nanometer chip, and also especially in the mobile phone industry. But for the car itself, mostly, let's say 28 nanometer process chip will be enough. And at the moment, I think China can produce this kind of chip. Therefore, for the current generation of vehicles, I think within 2 or 3 years, the domestic chip will make up the gap. And you know, tier ones and OEMs, especially local brands, are turning to China-made and China-designed chips. That's a general trend. And of course, from the end users, they are not really differentiating US brand and China brand simply due to political reasons. People still, you know, flock to buy Tesla. Interestingly enough, I saw an article saying that BYD Han EV, which sells at a price of, let's say, 260,000 RMB, less than 40,000 US dollar, is selling very well, above 10,000 units per month in the last 3 to 4 months, and replacing BBA, so Mercedes-Benz, BMW, and Audi users' old car. This is a pretty interesting phenomena because, let's say, people are buying vehicles exactly as the other expert, Sammy, mentioned. You know, performance and price ratio is essential because you're either buying a luxury brand or you are buying a low-cost EV, which is only 30,000 RMB from SGM Wuling. But from the middle market, people are very much rational consumers. If you want to buy a car or an SUV with a 20,000 RMB price tag, there are plenty of supply in the market. Therefore, you would have to choose the mileage of the EV and all kinds of smart features, smart cabin, level 2 ADAS, OTA features. And I would say that the smart features are predominant in the choice that people are making. Not necessarily the smart cabin from global brands are better than domestic ones, especially what my personal judgment would be Volkswagen, their MEB platform, the ID4 variants are going to suffer in the China market because the human-machine interaction is much inferior than existing new EV makers like NIO, like Xiaopeng, et cetera, And I would also guess that the OTA features from the MEB platform vehicles are not so advanced. Therefore, although the EVs from Volkswagen can sell very well in Germany, in Europe, doesn't necessarily mean that they will sell as they planned in China. So in summary, it doesn't matter it's US, European, or China product, you would have to really cater to the demand and requirement of the end users, new generation in China.
Right. So let me turn to Professor X too on this set of issues, because obviously your platform relies on very sophisticated chips that presumably are imported from the US, or at least US companies today. Do you see the geopolitical tensions affecting your ability to get access to the right chips and other technology in the future?
And not really. Just like Frank mentioned, I think we can separate the question into hardware and software. For the hardware side, it's just like you can sell iPhone in China. There's actually a huge demand of users of buying iPhone in China. For the hardware, I would say that the separation is not very clear because all these hardware product as a piece of device, it can be sold very freely across the market, either in China or in US or other countries. So we see the trend that about the separation is more on the software, just like following what Frank was mentioning. The software, the user behavior could be very different, but specific to autonomous driving, there's also another newer dimension of complexity. Because the AI software is not just the software itself, it's just not lines of codes, but it actually requires a significant amount of data being captured in the local city to train the AI. This actually makes everything much more complicated. And that's why where we can see a lot of separation going on is simply because the AI requires capturing data, and data policy is actually very strict in either China, US, or any other country, like Europe, many countries in the Europe as well. And almost any country in the world will require the data to stay locally within the country. Therefore, for a foreign company without a significant China R&D operation, they will not be able to leverage the data to train the AI to have a huge amount of training data for improving the AI system. That's why we will see that there a huge trend for separation for those AI related data-related AI system. And we can see that in China, for example, the robotaxi, the fully self-driving robotaxi market we're addressing, they are all local players. That we have to compete with Baidu, Didi, all these local players, but there's actually no international players could be operating here. So that's another special part about the industry.
Yeah, so that's a very good example of how decoupling is actually happening in a particular part of the industry. At the same time, it doesn't seem to affect certain other parts of the industry. I mean, Bill, maybe we can get you to talk about this because obviously there are a lot of big and small companies in the US and Europe that want to enter the China market or access the China market more. And I guess part of the question is, should they be worried about their future access to the China market given the geopolitical and policy pressures? At the same time, and maybe this is a related question, you have a lot of Chinese companies trying to go even more global than they used to before, partly because of tariffs, partly because there are opportunities to export their EVs in Europe or maybe elsewhere, partly for supply chain reasons. So that's going to put pressure on China to allow foreign companies to continue to access the China market, I assume. So Bill, how do you figure out all these different dynamics?
Yeah, you've got trade and tech battles now that are kind of forming around the U.S. and China. What the trade war effectively did is it basically limited Chinese exports from in some degree having a barrier to coming to the U.S. But what it did is it caused Chinese companies to reconfigure to become less dependent on sourcing purely from China. China and U.S. companies, both China and global companies, both now looking for distribution of their supply chains rather than one low-cost country to source from. And by no means was China, China's competitiveness on the manufacturing and supply chain side was not because it maybe started with low effective supply chain aggregator for the critical ingredients needed for products. So I don't think you know, I think what the trade war effectively did is it caused the China manufacturing footprint to be redistributed. It's causing that to happen. Companies, you know, really relocating where they're building things away from concentration in one and only one place. But it's very deeply rooted already, and it's hard to move around. The trade barrier, though, or the technology protected barriers, and they're both sides, right? They're U.S. You know, singling out and putting certain technologies on protected lists and making it less friendly for companies to kind of source technology from different places around the world, including China. But what it effectively does is it makes the technology companies dependent on the sun that they orbit. So if you're a US tech and you have limited ability to commercialize in China, you're going to be more dependent on a market that's less efficient at scaling technology for future mobility. So I think what it's doing is it's causing these bubbles, and it's causing companies who are not in either one of the planetary systems of China, US, to have to choose where is the more efficient path to commercialization for my technology. And if we're talking about, say, EV, China is far and away the largest EV market in the world. China is far and away the more likely market to efficiently scale autonomous vehicle technology. So if you're talking about whether it's you know, Waymo or Pony, or sorry, Waymo or Argo or any of the US AV tech companies, effectively a technology barrier that limits access to scaling in China effectively stunts the growth of the technology companies. So I think we're actually going to be in a world where, in a bifurcated world, companies are going to have to choose their path to commercialization. And I think this is where I think the US tech industry is going to suffer, because the China market will actually embrace and scale technology far more effectively than the US market will, just simply because of the reasons that we talked about earlier. Demand aggregation, commercialization at scale, that really does favor China.
A great summary, Bill. I wish we could keep talking about these because there's a lot more questions I have, but we've already gone over our time, unfortunately. This has been a fantastic discussion with the panel, all of you coming from very different backgrounds and different subsectors within this interesting industry. So I wanted to thank all of you for participating and contributing today. I hope you enjoyed it and the audience did as well. We're now going to move to the